introduce our sponsor for today's luncheon, Comcast. And we have Rusty DeWitt with us. He's going to say a few words on behalf of the sponsor, and then we'll get going with the question and answer. Let's give them a thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Comcast is privileged to be able to sponsor an event like this, and we love partnering with the Chamber and also serving our customers here in Wayne County. I would like to let you know that we are constantly upgrading the network here, and every business and even residents right now that has Comcast service or is capable of getting Comcast service, we provide a gig there. So a great service for Wayne County, and we really appreciate your support. And I'm going to turn it over to the man of the day here, Phil Quinn.
All right, thanks everybody. So who else is nervous that I'm standing up here? I mean, honestly, yep, I got you. Well, what we're gonna do today is we're gonna have a good conversation. I hope that we get a chance to get to learn the Congressman a little bit more about him as he makes his way up to the stage. We don't have a bio. We wanted to get right into some of the questions that you have. I really want to take a moment and thank the Issues and Advocacies Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. They worked diligently and to put it together a list of questions that we think are fair, and hope that we get an opportunity to get as many of those in as possible, as well as yours. Don't forget the cards are on the table, and we'll do our best to make sure that your concerns and questions are heard. I don't know, he's working the last table. We get ready. It is my pleasure to introduce the Congressman for the 6th District, Mr. Greg Pence. We're gonna make sure that the Congressman has some water. Do you want to walk? You want to walk and talk? Well, then, yeah, I'm going to turn it on. This is not in the script, sir. I just thought you should know. It's great. Well, I'm going to sit down. I got a day job I got to do. All right. So we've got quite a few questions. The first thing, though, I think is because we met officially for the first time today, and I think it's important to start off by talking about successes. And the time that you have been in Congress, you have been able to successfully have some bills heard and passed, and I wanted you to take an opportunity, if you would, and share some of those successes with us.
Wow, that's almost a setup. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
You know, we see all the time how partisan it is and how people don't get along. And I'm actually pulling this out as a prop to tell you that I have sponsored 5 bills that I led and had written, and I've co-sponsored 50 bills in the House. And these are bills that have been passed, and they couldn't go to the floor because I'm a Republican and in the minority. They couldn't go to the floor unless a Democrat agreed to do that and sponsored it. So that's an example how things we see on so many venues that people don't get along out there and they're not getting anything done, but a lot is getting done. In fact, we passed a budget recently. That hasn't happened in quite a while. And humanitarian relief for down at the border, $4.6 billion, which was a kind of a heavy lift, but we got it done. And lots of other things get done out there. I think if I would go through this on behalf of the 6th District, we've written up for 7 or 8 grants that we've gotten. I've written letters on behalf of constituents. I think that's about 75. I've met with 900 people from the district out in Washington, D.C., and we've responded to over 10,000 emails, telephone calls, and letters out there. And we can only correspond and work with people that are in the zip codes of the 6th District. So, you know, my glass is half full. I didn't get into this thing to promote myself. I've already had a career. This was, for me, really my opportunity to give back to the district that I grew up in. And so I'm just out there. I call myself a workhorse, not a show horse. If you've ever heard that before, it's been used against my brother. So.
Oh, I've got questions for your brother. Don't. We'll be able to talk about that here in just a second. Was there a Mr. Smith moment for you? Was there a point when you were elected and you got into D.C. and you just went, wow, why? How did I get here? Did you have one of those moments?
Yeah, I know. How I got there was why my wife told me I had to get out of the house and get a job. I was semi-retired. Not really. We were talking about that a little earlier. You know, I've been involved behind the scenes for a long time, going all the way back to 1988, but never ran for and held a public office. I've been out to D.C. a lot. I had met and become friends with some of those folks that are out there. And I will walk to vote, and I always walk from the Cannon Building outside to the house to go vote. And I will be with maybe some younger folks, and they go, wow, I can't believe I'm here. And I go, yeah, and I got to be back in 15 minutes to meet with some people. So no, I really haven't, and maybe that's a good thing.
Let's get into some of the issues that I know the Issues and Advocacies wanted to talk about. We've heard recently, last 24, 48 hours, about how large our largest employer is, Reed Health. And so healthcare is an important issue for us in this neck of the woods. And specifically, healthcare could be 1 in 5 jobs in this community. And so we kind of watch and see what Congress does. What are there some things that are maybe in the works to help with healthcare? Is there anything that we should be paying particular attention to? Where did he go?
I'm leaving.
Okay.
That's not a question I'm prepared to answer.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But, you know, from our standpoint, is there rural healthcare is under siege, and we've seen that just in Connorsville. What are some things that you're tackling or that the Congress is tackling when it comes to healthcare? So
specifically, there's nothing that I have particularly tackled when it comes to healthcare. I'm on transportation and infrastructure and foreign affairs, so that really doesn't get to my committees. As I've gone around, you know, I've heard all about reimbursements is an issue that I'm going to keep my eye on for Medicare, for the supplemental, for rural hospitals. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert. My legislative director, Hillary, very much is. And so we watch all of this closely. You know, one of the bigger things to be concerned about, and I live in Columbus, Indiana. I come home every week. I'll get on the first plane back, and I go to get on the last plane out when I have to go out there. In Bartholomew County, our big problem is we are short on nurses, and so personnel in rural areas is a huge deal. And you know, like you said, the takeover recently of one of the hospital programs in our district, you know, I hope we don't see more of that.
Well, certainly, I think it needed to be done, or there wasn't going to be health care in Fayette County. And certainly we appreciate the idea of leaving things alone and not doing a major overhaul. But we don't hear a lot of movement that way. It seems to be geared towards an upcoming election. So we didn't know if there was anything that was going on in the House right now, any structure of the bills. But that's okay, because you're in infrastructure, and we've got one of those questions.
Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't. So if you want to talk more of the broader health care issue, yeah, nothing's happening right now.
Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about roads and infrastructure. I don't know if you came across on I-70, but it's in bad shape. Did you happen to make that trek over?
No. So I got Ryan Jarmula here. He's my deputy chief of staff and district director. He's in Columbus, and then my new driver Nathan. Somewhere, what town was that you thought we'd go cross country? so I didn't make it to 70.
Well, you're lucky. One of the issues that we have is we're a logistics community. We've got lots of warehousing, and we ship a lot of stuff out of Wayne County. And one of the concerns is there anything additionally that the federal government can do to help with that infrastructure? And we're the crossroads of America, but man, it seems like we've struggled with that recently.
So when I first decided I should go out and talk to the county chairs about whether or not I should run, and Misty Hollis gave me a lot of advice. By the way, Misty runs our office here on a part-time basis, and we made her do it. The number one thing I heard about was infrastructure. Infrastructure in the 6th District. Number 2 is veterans issues. I'm a veteran. I've done a lot of work on the veteran issues. That's why I wanted to get on the Infrastructure Transportation Committee. My background is in the whole transportation thing, and I've been involved in that in one way or another for many years. I thought by May we would have a new infrastructure bill because the chairman and the ranking member said we would, and that we would look at infrastructure being defined as sewer, water, roads, bridges, rural internet, and ports, all those different things. We saw on television an Oval Office meeting between Pelosi, Schumer, and the president that shut that thing down. And so we have done very little in infrastructure. I'm positive, because I sat one day, I chaired the infrastructure committee the day that every congressional person came in and told the committee, here are the infrastructure issues we need to be looking at. It was all day long, and I stayed there and I listened to that. That the desire out in the country and in Congress to do something, it will come to the forefront, hopefully before the next election, but if not, it would be right after the next election. I'm positive of that. They're crying out for it everywhere.
I want to talk about a couple of more issues that recently have been at the forefront, and a lot of those are about gun control. And the mass shootings in Dayton particularly resonated with this community because of its proximity. Of course, El Paso as well. It seemed as though when Congress got back into session, we would be looking at a red flag law, maybe universal background checks. Do you think that that's still possible? Are those still aspects that are on the horizon as you get back into the session?
So most people don't know that Congress passed a gun law. It's H.R. 8, and it has now gone to the Senate. So really, the ball is in the Senate's court. I'm going to say right off the bat, folks, I am a unabashed proponent of the Second Amendment for many reasons, not the least of which the purpose of the Second Amendment was so the government wouldn't overrun us. The bill that was passed, H.R. 8, was a federal takeover and put their toe in control over all the states, background checks. But you always have to be, I voted against it. And the reason I voted against it, you have to look at the nuances in some of these bills. And in this bill, it required background checks and fees between Bob and I. I couldn't give Bob a gun. I would have to go to a licensed dealer, pay a fee. We'd have to do a waiting period, which was extended, and then he would or would not be given the license to carry that. If Bob took my gun and borrowed my gun, and here's the unintended consequences, I could be liable for if he committed a crime with that. And so I'll listen to anything that makes sense to help keep guns out of the wrong people, violent people, people with mental challenges, but we need to have an honest conversation about that.
Well, again, because I sit in this chair, I want to maintain that role as moderator. Personally speaking, I have trouble with this part of high-capacity magazines, which is a different aspect and not part of the first gun control question. We're not allowed to have nuclear weapons as an individual. We're not allowed to set off dynamite because of the potential mass killing. Is there a simple bill that could be written that just says, look, you don't need big double drum high capacity magazines? Is that something that could get passed through Congress and onto the Senate and onto the president's signature?
Well, I can tell you it could get passed through the House. I mean, the Democrats have the majority. Would the Senate take it up? We'll have to see. Remember, folks, and this is going to get real partisan, and I really don't want it to denigrate into a Democrat or a Republican. I just want to tell you what's going on, what are some of the opportunities. But we have some presidential candidates out there that are talking about taking and having people turn in guns. Boy, that scares the hell out of me. It's a little bit like, I'll tell you, I'm unabashedly pro-life as well. And look what we had in Virginia and New York. And it's why I sponsored the Born Alive bill and said, no, you can't kill babies after they're born. So I'm always concerned about unintended consequences. And while some of the bills that my peers have introduced are worthy of discussion and debate in Congress, they're sticking in some things that you really have to read it. What I do every day, I go out, as I said, I go out there. I actually try most days to go to church at 7 o'clock in the morning to get myself right. And then I will meet with some people, and then I have committee meetings and votes in the morning, and then votes about 6:30 at night. Then I go back and I study the bills the next day and get into the detail of them. So, I always want to make sure I know what I'm voting for and what's in those bills.
Let's talk. Maybe a side part to that is Homeland Security. And schools seem to be getting a lot of cash to be able to do upgrades. It's understandable. But the business community, certain businesses are having to make significant security upgrades. Is there anything available for those organizations that are not tax supported to get some help from the government?
So are tax supported, you mean?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The answer to that is I don't think anybody's contemplated that yet. I will tell you, when the phenomenal systems, programs, personnel, reactions, procedures that were put in place here saved a lot of lives. Over in Shelbyville, we have the #1 secure high school. In Muncie, it's all locked down with law enforcement on premise. I don't think we ought to get too much into how much things cost to protect the kids. That's something we should do. And the state and many of the counties, your county, has been doing that, and that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. There are some businesses that are making some significant upgrades as well, but you mentioned the Dennis Intermediate School situation, which all of us are still in awe of, and I know that you've met with a lot of school officials, law enforcement, and did a review. One of the things that our committee wanted to ask was, how is Congress able to help streamline the release of information for people that may be suffering after a violent incident without stepping on HIPAA and FERPA laws? Is there something there that can get some treatment for the people that survive these things?
Actually, I did receive these questions beforehand, and I actually don't understand that question. I'll be honest with you. Because the HIPAA protects the medical files of people, and then the other one protects the educational files. And so I really didn't understand where we were going with that question.
Well, I think correct me if I'm wrong, certainly there are the school wanted to be able to help some teachers and some school kids that were suffering from being a part of this incident. And it seemed like that information, there was some stalls in making sure that help or treatment could get through because of HIPAA and FERPA. And again, it's a unique situation because we've had to live that.
We got to get in the detail.
Yeah,
It
right.
seems to me that parental permission would have been the impediment in both those cases. But I don't know.
Right.
I just don't know what the details are.
Please, sir.
Yeah.
I really believe it was more on the front end of that than it was the back end of that, and that was when we know that there are individuals who may have mental health issues that are going on, and we have providers who are meeting their needs. Streamlining, you and I have had this conversation about streamlining that process where they can share information with those who need to know, whether that's school officials or law enforcement officials, and what are those blurred lines where that information can be traded?
Yeah.
Because so often in these incidents we hear where there are all kinds of red flags that went off. Well, if there were red flags, but the people who needed to know didn't know. So I think that was kind of more of the question from the issues and advocacy group, was really looking at, are there ways to, while we still have the privacy laws in place, to streamline that process?
So I'll look further into that.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's almost, you almost teed me up on the unintended consequences there, right? If you see something, say something so we can do something. But we've imposed these laws and these restrictions that now we can't, in a sense, you're saying we can't do that, right? So Ryan, if we can, let's have Hillary kind of look in. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Let's talk a couple of other issues that we have. One is there's been some movement statewide for high-speed access for rural communities. We know that that's...
He's teeing me up here, isn't he?
Well, I didn't send you the questions. But how are you working on that? Are you working on some initiatives when it comes
Got
to
a bill passed.
There you go.
Rural broadband bill, $75 million for additional grants. We took it from administrative costs in the administration, and we moved it over to the grant program. When I get back, we are putting together a bill I am writing and looking for sponsors. By the way, that bill passed 425 to 6 on the floor. It's the first bill I ever introduced. Driving over here, I was talking to my brother Thomas, and boom. And I guarantee you, in Wayne County, they'll tell you you're 100% covered and you can't get grant money. And that's happening all over the place. So I'm introducing a bill that calls for a study of coverage and bringing the different federal agencies together to agree what the definition of coverage is and who's covered. Because if they say one house or one place in a county or a section is covered, then the county's covered. And so it's wrong. And so that's what I'm working on. That's a big one because, let's get back, health care. That affects health care for people. It affects law enforcement. It affects kids. Some kids can't go home and do their homework. They got to stay later or come earlier or do it during maybe their free time. There's just all kinds of, we have moved into this internet age, and we can't use it in rural America. That's an infrastructure issue, and I'm really confident we're going to move that one forward. Of course, the state's done its share. $100 million for rural broadband.
Right. Let's talk about trade. That was a particular issue that came up in our committee meetings. Many of our local businesses are affected by international trade agreements or the lack thereof. Where do you stand on the USMCA, and how can we see this issue get resolved in Washington so we can kind of get back to the business of growing the local economy?
Yeah, so let's break up. So let's get into the tariffs, and then I'll come back to the USMCA. So I meet today, and then this afternoon, I'm going to meet with manufacturing, with business, and with agri folks. I've been doing that ever since I came back. I talk to people, how are tariffs affecting you? What do you see on the horizon? And what do we need to bring stability to the market? Right now, this speculation, whether it's corn or beans or steel, aluminum, that is being manipulated by the markets, and that instability is holding back investment or causing farmers to be insecure, okay? The solution every single time, every trade group, and yesterday we met with the largest manufacturers yesterday evening in the 6th District and a national manufacturing trade organization, and I said, tell me what we need to do. USMCA, United States-Mexican Agreement. The only reason that hasn't passed is because Nancy Pelosi won't introduce it. I can tell you, if that was introduced to the floor, it'd be like my rural broadband bill. It'd be 425 to 6. I know that my Democratic peers are getting the same amount of pressure to pass this. They're getting it from the ag community and the manufacturing community. It would bring stability, it would open up markets, it would bring fairness to trade. I'll also go a step further and say that the insecurity and the inability to move forward on China is because the Chinese aren't stupid. They know that if we can't get it together on USMCA, if we as a country, if these two parties and this administration, Senate and House, can't get it together on USMCA, why do they need to work something out with this administration in the United States? And I think if we do the USMCA, they'll see that we're serious about fair trade. Let me also say, folks, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, China is something we really need to be careful about going forward. They have Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese, they combine the military, the government, and their economy, and they go out across the world and they push their politics into emerging and other countries at the expense of our business. We know they've stolen intellectual property. There are places where they've literally run industries out of business. As an example, in Australia, they don't make buses anymore, and they used to make a ton of them. So all of this is interconnected, and I think we've got to pass USMCA. And I would say to anyone here, regardless of your party, ask Nancy Pelosi, why won't you pass the USMCA? Why won't you introduce it? I hope that we do. You know, I know a guy's running around the country peddling this every day, and he looks a lot like me, right?
I can't wait to ask my vice president question, but it's not time yet. I'm kind of keeping an eye on our watch too, and if anybody has any cards that they are questions, we'll try to get to those as well. I want to talk about immigration from the standpoint of our community in a different way than I had heard anybody talk about the issue. It's not about ICE events. It's not about the question that came up for our committee wasn't about building a wall. It had to deal with issues where we need your office's help, I think. That we are suffering from a workforce development issue, which is their second question about that. But we have gotten access to some new hires that are not from the country, not from the United States, and we're trying to keep them in their positions here, but with some of the regulations, it has been quite difficult. How can your office help us keep those people that we've hired from out of the country staying in this country?
Well, my office is limited by the number of visas available and each case is very specific. If you want some help, pence.house.gov has all the information, who to call, all our telephone numbers, our location. Certainly you can, Misty has office hours here Tuesdays and Thursdays, Misty? 4 to 5:30 at the City Hall. You know, come and tell us about specific cases. on a maybe a macro level, I believe in just, fair, compassionate, and legal immigration. I think we need to build the wall so that we know who's coming in. And then I always like to say, we need more. And that's what folks have told me everywhere, whether you're a farmer, you're, I'll say, our biggest employer in the 6th District, Cummins Engine Company. You know, they want to bring people on H-1B visas from all over the world, but those are limited, okay? We need to, I believe in an immigration plan that you have a sponsor, a job, and a place to live, and we ought to bring people in and where we need it. The workforce development, here's an interesting thing to me. I've been in business all my life, first elected office I've ever run for. And workforce development, I watched kind of really build a lot of momentum. And it really helped develop skills as we needed higher level skills. But I've seen more and more and more companies take back their own workforce development. And the reason is because there's so few people to choose from. They're going down into the high schools, they're going to the colleges, and they're doing internships. And we don't have enough bodies in the 6th District. And I got bad news.
Yeah. Go ahead.
My peers in Congress don't have enough bodies where they're from too.
Yeah. Is there something that breaks that code of unemployability? I mean, near record unemployment thanks to like Eastern Indiana Works and other groups like that, workforce development. Is there a magic wand that you can wave and get more people back into the system to work? Is there
I don't think there's a lot more people in the 6th District that aren't working, that if they're not working because they don't want to, because we have wage inflation in the 6th District. Does anybody experience that? Raise your hand. It's happening everywhere. Which is a good thing for the middle class. I don't think we're just short on people. Companies are now willing to just find me somebody. I will develop them myself. Because I need somebody.
Yeah. We've got a question from the audience, and I want to tackle that one. So we have to switch you microphones. So you're going to have to be tethered to the chair for a second. We do have a couple of questions still where we're going to be asking about opioid abuse, and there's a couple other things too. But if you have a card that you would like to submit a question, please do so. This would be where during my radio show, this would be where we take a commercial break and come back. But we're not going to do that. We're going to turn things over to Susan Yeager, who's got a question about Alzheimer's support.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to ask the question. I lost my mother to Alzheimer's just this past July, last month. And I know when she was diagnosed 7-8 years ago or so, it was difficult to know what to do. And I've understood that there is a House Bill 1873 that brings to light the Medicare options for planning that helps caregivers. But apparently many of the clinicians and the doctors don't know about the services that Medicare already has available. And this bill, as I understand, is to help give education to the medical field that these Medicare benefits are available to caregivers for planning for Alzheimer's. And I wondered if you would be in support of that.
Well, I would. I've got a number of people from the district that have come out on a number of occasions. Scott is one, and have met me in our Columbus office to discuss the issues. I'm sorry for your loss. Has the bill been introduced yet? Because that's my understanding that it has. I wouldn't be surprised I am not already a sponsor. Yeah, that's the type. That'd be an example of the 50 that we've passed. You know, those are things that we're doing for people that I want to do things like that. So that's an easy lift.
Yeah, we're all sorry for your loss, Susan, all of us. While we're on maybe a tangent of that would be, we've seen some inroads. Of course, there's major settlement and pending with Purdue Pharma. Johnson & Johnson was just found in violation and are going to have to pay a bill unless they appeal, which I guess they're going to do, about opioid abuse. How do you feel that fight is going? Where do you see us moving forward with that? Specifically, the $572 million federal lawsuit. How is that going to impact Hoosiers with some of the lawsuits that some of our cities and states have been involved in?
Well, the state's going to have to bring a lawsuit. You know, what are they going to do for it? I'm seeing some innovative things in terms of that in down in my town, because Cummins has funded this. We have an ASAP program that brings all the interested parties in the community to help with rehabilitation and addressing it. But, you know, let me go all the way back. There is a responsibility of Big Pharma here that, you know, I think they're starting to address and take a look at. I think Senator Young is introducing a bill in the Senate, and we'll see where that goes to the House to, you know, hold them accountable for these overprescriptions. I don't know if any of you saw 60 Minutes last Sunday. Just horrendous. One guy, I don't even remember the number, but when you went, wow, he did how many? Like 8,000 pills for one person in a year, and you go, you gotta be kidding me. And I know personally, and would assume many of you here do, that got on the painkillers, and then once that was off, they got in trouble with other things. I will also tell you that the sheriffs all across the 6th District talk to me about they know where the fentanyl is coming from. You know, they seized a whole bunch from China the other day, and it's coming through south of the border. And literally in our district, a lot of it's coming over right from Cincinnati, that particular area. So shutting off the supply, I think is, you know, we still have to be focused on that.
Let's raise the tariff on fentanyl. How about that? Going back to education, hot off the press. Question from our superintendent of Richmond Community Schools. Federal Department of Education is proposing $7.1 billion cut in funding. What's your position on that? This is a new question. You didn't get this one in advance.
Yeah, I'd have to get the details on that. Is it written in as a proposal, or is it hearsay?
Great question. I saw the headline and didn't know if that would be a topic that would come up for discussion
now
today.
We go back and we will finish up the appropriations bills. I think we have 7 of them left. You know, and
yeah.
I don't know. That's news to me.
I don't know. I would not want to speak for the school corporation, but talk about unintended consequences. With a cut like that, it could put our community in jeopardy. Next to the hospital, the next largest employer is Richmond Community Schools in this area. So that is certainly something that we'd like to keep an eye on, and of course, be able to get your take. Maybe that's a good spot for us to talk about accessibility. How is the best way for us to be able to reach you? We know that there are some limited office hours here, and I don't know if that could be expanded, or what's the best way for us to get these kind of questions to you?
So while we may only be manning the office for that period of time, we man the office in D.C. We have an office in Richmond, Greenfield, Columbus, and what am I missing? Muncie. All but here is open, and Greenfield will be a little more part-time, but the rest of it we're open, 9 to 5 every day, and We are accessible on the internet, by phone, and we would be happy to set up appointments or work through any issues you have. Again, as I said, we've handled 10,000 phone calls, emails, and letters. So I have 7 people here in the district, and I know because I've been involved in the 6th district since 1988. I'm 62, in case you want to do the math real quick. I have 7 people, and that's more than any of my predecessors ever had. And I always like to put our district director on the spot so he can tell you what's the most important thing for this. So constituent services. So give us a call. We'll call you back. We'll meet with you, whatever.
Well, Ryan promised me a monthly interview on a radio show where we could have these questions submitted. So I'll work with him. He didn't do that. I'm teasing. He didn't. But
I actually do a lot of remotes when I'm out in D.C. That's kind of what I do after church. I go get something to eat and do radios.
Well, I mean, let's do that. It's not a question, it's a request. Okay. I do have one, Dr. Stacy Atkinson. She's acting chancellor for Ivy Tech Community College. Something that's important to a lot of us is veteran services, and as she is a veteran, wanted to talk about what do you do, or how can you support veterans that are still suffering from PTSD, and are there some initiatives out there, or just help in navigating those struggles in general?
Yeah, I don't want to go read all the bills I've co-sponsored on that, but I mean I'm very, and you can go to our website and see, but I'm very focused on helping the veterans in Blue Water. I think most of you know I was in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983. And I left 10 days before they blew it up, and I got a bill passed on the House floor that goes after Iran, and brings money back to the families. I spend a great. I'm on darn near every veterans bill there possibly is, and that's something you can take that one to the bank. I'm committed to helping the veterans.
Okay. I know we've just got a limited amount of time left, and there's some more cards coming. Let me ask you just the first part. Goodness gracious, these people are writing great questions here. So let's talk about the ability to have you back in town for maybe a town hall or an open forum. We had talked about this event being an event that was here to support the chamber, not a political campaign. I thought that was pretty important that we established that this is for our chamber members. Is there an opportunity to have you back for a town hall soon?
Well, I kind of think this is an open forum. Anyone was eligible to come here, I assume.
Well, to be fair, though,
right?
there was a ticket charge. The chamber members were $35, and non-chamber members were $50. There might be some people that have questions that can't afford to come to a chamber dinner, or because of work. Is there an opportunity to hold another one, have you back sometime?
Well, I will be back here Friday.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to ask. It's more humor for me in talking a little bit about your brother. Now, I've done a good job in making sure that
Which one?
There you go. I knew that was going to happen.
I teed him up.
Specifically, the vice president. And I have some thoughts about having this relationship where your brother is the vice president. And there's got to be some uniqueness about that. And I'm wondering, are you able to text him? I mean, can you text him without having to go through Secret Service? I mean, how much access do you get to have to the vice president?
There's lots of fun questions and fun answers. Under no circumstance would he ever carry a phone, because that's insecure, right? Okay. Your phones are being tracked, and you can be listened to. So he does not carry a cell phone. He has a comms guy, 2 of them, with not 60-pound backpacks, they're about 80. And they're full of multi types of communication, whether it's satellite, cell, bat phone, the whole shot. They're in that backpack. So I can't text him. I actually have to get a hold of a family member and then go from there.
Yeah. I find that interesting because there is some security issues there. So have you been able to go, I don't know, watch a game on television or something? I mean, what have you been able to do? Walk and enjoy cherry blossoms? What have you been able to do with the vice president? Anything fun?
Well, he'll be coming to my son's wedding next weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now how does that work? Is there
My wife
security?
calls up his wife and
No.
send him an
Yeah,
invite.
but there has to be security there, right? I mean, this is an issue where they've got to
Yeah.
come in and expect the food and
So-
check under the chef's hat,
Yeah.
all this sort of
No,
thing,
you're
right?
You're right. So I will have to go through security just like everybody else does. His son had his wedding in Brown County, I think about a year and a half ago, and then we had the brunch reception at our house Sunday morning. Well, the Secret Service shows up at 5 o'clock in the morning with 2 dogs, and they go through our house in the woods. I live in the woods. And then they stood out in the woods the whole time, and everybody that came down the street had to get, they take the mirrors, and the dog had to sniff the car and the whole thing. And it's a tremendous hassle that's pretty cool the first couple of times. And then it gets real old after that. So, 2 weeks ago, the president and vice president came to Cincinnati. And the 6th District is adjacent to Cincinnati. So the White House called and said, hey, the president would really like you to come, and, he'll call you out and that type of thing. And that's a little bit of a command performance, so you go. And I got there, and I saw some of the folks, and I said, am I going to get to see my brother? And he says, well, right now he's still writing his speech. Well, I said, I came all the way here. Am I going to get to see him? So I did get to see him. He walked across the stage and goes, so that was the sum total.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's always surrounded. It just amazes me. Our presidents in this country live in a prison in this respect. They can't open the windows. They can't go outside. They can't go walk the dog. They can't go for a run. Bill Clinton and George Bush, they used to go for jogs, and the Secret Service would find them or ride a bike or run with them. They can't do that anymore ever since 9/11. Now, my brother lives on a 70-acre naval base, so he literally takes his dog and they go for walks, and he can sit out on the porch. So he's in a little less of a prison.
Yeah. We just have a little bit of time, so I'm just going to ask a follow-up to something I've always been curious about. Have you gotten to ride on Air Force One, Marine One? Have you gotten to do some of these cool things? I mean, your last name's Pence. You should be able to do some of this stuff, right? If you pass clearance.
I know. I wish. So I got to tell you a better story. All right. So I was in the Marine Corps. So I actually did get to ride on. It's Marine One. All the helicopters are the same. It just depends on who's on it. And when I rode on that with him, I got all choked up, and he got choked up, because that was one of the coolest things I ever did. But so the overall answer to your question, my brother was my congressman, then he was my governor, and now he's my vice president. So my family's kind of been eased into, your brother's important. He's a big deal. We've never bought it, but but people have tried to ease us into that, okay? But the next generation, it's a little more interesting. So my son works for the president, and he was in Sicily, and they said, hey, do you want to ride back on Air Force One? And so he said, okay. So he flew back on Air Force One to Andrews Air Force Base, and at that time he lived in New York. And he called his aunt and uncle, the vice president, and said, hey, I'm coming to D.C., can I stay at your house? And they said, yeah, sure, but we're leaving Sunday because it's the Indianapolis 500. Do you want to go? He said, sure. So he got to their house. I got up the next morning. Marine One came, picked him up, took him to Andrews Air Force Base. They flew an Air Force Two to Columbus, Indiana. 6 Black Hawk helicopters came, picked him up, flew him over to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He got in the Beast, in the motorcade, and drove around one lap, waving his hand out the window, and then he came and picked Dad up in a golf cart. So in 48 hours, he got Air Force One, Marine One, Air Force Two, Black Hawk helicopters, the Beast.
Yeah.
I got a golf cart.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That sounds legit. I mean, that sounds completely fair. So let me ask you a question, getting back to maybe a little bit more of the politics. It is polarizing. There are issues, and people take sides on almost every issue. Is there one thing where if you, Congressman Greg Pence, were able to just wave a magic wand and say, boy, if we could just fix this thing, what would make it better, where you could see more bipartisanship on a lot of things, maybe a little bit more or higher profile in the media than maybe some of the bills that you've already passed?
You mean for me specifically, or
Yeah,
generally,
just from your
what would
perspective.
benefit
Is there one thing?
the discourse in this country?
Yeah, what changes it, if anything?
What has changed it, in many ways, is social media. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and how that has driven what they call clickbait, and so people will do things to get attention, to raise money on the internet. You know, years ago, and the media all remembers this, if you were, and I helped my brother in 1988, if you were going to run for Congress or for an office, you had to go talk to the editorial board, and you had to get their endorsement. So you had to go talk and meet with people and, lay out your agenda. Today, there's just an awful lot of attacking your opponent. Now, I've never done that, and it's just not in my DNA. And actually, my brother's a lot nicer than me. So, but I just don't believe in that. That's where we've really denigrated in our discourse. Let's just attack the other person. Some people Monday in Muncie, some folks said, what do you think about campaign finance law and how the dollars have gone way, 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 way? The negativity costs a lot of money. If I attack Bob, then Bob, his consultants, and everyone will say, you must attack me back. I don't buy that. I think you go out, you meet people. In my case now, I'm out here telling you what I've done for you. It's all about constituent services, and we'll just keep doing that and stay away from that negative discourse.
Yeah. I'm willing to go off Twitter if everybody else is.
I'm not on it. I do not tweet book.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that what you call it?
Instapost. Yeah, that's fine. Were there any other questions that came from the audience? Okay. All right. I don't know that I have much else. I mean, I think we've exhausted our time. We really, before you go, we'd really love to be able to have you back. I think one of the reasons why we've had such a good response to this event is because it has been one of the opportunities for us to be able to kind of sit down with you face to face, and certainly more opportunities for us to be able to have you back here, whether it's a chamber hosted event or, I don't know, just coming out and walking around the grounds. We'd love to be able to do that because
Well, I'm out a lot, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even. How many events have we done this week? Like
Ryan said, you're ready to go back to session, right?
No,
Lots of miles.
I don't go back to the 9th, but like I said, I live in Columbus,
Yeah.
and when I'm back, I'm out and about. I mean, Misty can tell you about that. The chairs can tell you about that. Vivian can tell you about that. So, we get out into the communities. I am leaving here, and I am going to visit one of the operations here, and then have an ag meeting after that, and get feedback and hear from you all what I ought to go do when I get back there.
Right. Good. I appreciate everybody taking the time today. This will also be on Whitewater Community Television a little bit later on in the week, I think. And we appreciate all you being here. Also to our sponsor, Comcast, for being here. WCAreachamber.org. That's where you can find out a lot of the latest events that are happening with the Chamber of Commerce. Also follow them on all the social media, because the Chamber does put out a lot of really positive social media. Did you have something else? Sorry about that. Oh, yes. Oh, please come up and conclude us, because I could use some water break.
All right. Hey, thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'm going to turn things over to Brian Ballinger.
On behalf of the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank you and appreciate your service And I just want you to know that everyone here today, the community leaders, law enforcement, school officials, just know that we're here working hard every day trying to make sure that we do our part as citizens, trying to enrich the lives of those that are around us and those that we can impact, and we hope that you'll do the same for us. And again, we're thankful for your time today and your candid answers of our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.